Baby Beard Media. Shut up and take my podcast.
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 Stereotypes.
The foreigner. My customs are different. Upwards inflections. Australian.
Your beer belly is so big, your door doesn't even close, and that doesn't even make sense.
What the sentence ends well with, I got advice from Nixon.
We're a G-rated.
This is a proper... Are we? Futurama podcast.
Trademark. License. Copyright.
Don't say those words.
Shut up and take my podcast.
Hello, everyone. How you doing? Welcome to Shut Up and Take My Podcast, a Futurama podcast where we look at every... I just need to get a better intro than the one I've got.
No,
every single episode, from the beginning all the way to the end until it ends. I am here with James and Chris. No, Chris. Here with Phil,
please.
Okay, Phil.
Phil.
Yeah. Casual.
Yeah, my
Named
mum calls me
after
Philip,
Philip
that's
J. Fry.
Yes. Or Phil Collins.
My middle initial is, in fact, J.
Oh my god.
Is it?
Yeah, it
Oh,
is.
cool.
Don't tell the audience that. They know now. Philip
They're writing things down about me.
Another thing to add to it, because they've got to start with someone new now. They learned so much about Chris, and now they have to start again.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. I'm in a bit of an enigma, so...
So I hope you guys are happy with that choice.
Yeah.
You're stuck with it.
Yeah. It's not really a choice. It's just something you have to live
It's
with.
something we changed. It's something we changed.
So we are up to season 2, episode 4, Xmas Story, which is just an allusion to the fact that it's Christmas.
Yeah.
Not really anything to...
It's a Christmas story.
It is
but
a Christmas
it's
story.
Xmas
definitely
story.
Xmas.
Well,
in
it's
this episode,
Xmas for them. 'cause
Yeah.
it's-
Director Peter Avancino, who's back from A Flight to Remember, so the Titanic episode.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
And David X. Cohen, who's obviously one of the co-creators. This is the first episode he's written since the pilot.
Oh,
Is it really?
Yeah, so it's taken him this long to kind of delve his hand back into the writing pool.
good episode though.
Yeah. December 19th, I believe,
Yes.
1999. So
Just
they
before
actually
Christmas.
put it before Christmas.
I was actually wondering that watching that. I'm like, I really hope they release this on Christmas.
Somewhere around Christmas. I think I vaguely remember it coming out, actually.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oh god, long time.
I didn't know about Futurama in 99, I don't think.
I started watching
know.
it when it was new on TV. I remember the
Yeah,
kind of buzz
I swear
around
I
it,
would have
yeah.
seen it.
I
I would have been
was
so much of
there.
Simpsons late 90s. I remember.
I was 8.
I was
hey, you
older
could still
than
be
8.
watching it.
Yeah, I'm in 86, so... Oh, no, more information about me.
Oh, no.
86, Phil.
Yeah.
Phil J.
Phil J.
Introducing Robot Santa.
Yes.
Robot Santa, yeah.
Played by
John Goodman.
Yes.
Who is
John
just
freaking
so
Goodman.
good.
Only for this episode.
Really? Does he get replaced later
Yeah,
on?
they don't get him for the next episode. Tale of Two Santas, I think it's called. They
do
get
love
Dan
that
Castellaneta.
Does he do a very similar voice, though?
Yeah, well, Dan Castellaneta ends up replacing a lot of people just because he's Homer, obviously.
Yeah.
Like he replaced the genie when Robin Williams had the dispute with Disney.
Oh.
Okay.
So he ends up being the
That's
genie.
convenient,
so,
but
yeah,
strange.
so he's there for that.
But at least we get John Goodman. I love him.
We've
so
got a lot of
much.
voices, so he can sort of fill in those slots quite easily.
one of my favorite cameos in Conan O'Brien.
Yes.
Tells zero jokes.
He was a writer for The Simpsons as well. It's great. I love this. That
I feel
little
like the thing is like, you're going to be on board? Okay, sweet. You're not going to say anything funny.
Yeah.
and his head goes out of the jar.
His
So
head
his
comes
head
out
is
of him.
out of the
So
jar.
cool.
And Tinny Tim.
Tinny Tim.
Tinny Tim.
Tinny
yeah.
Tim.
I'm so hungry.
Who wants to run down the plot of Xmas Story?
Fry adjusts to new Xmas. I guess Leela feels lonely that she's got no one. Fry tries to, I guess, get her a gift so she doesn't feel quite lonely. They meet Evil Santa and try and survive.
Who gets you after dark?
Yeah, what do we think?
I love it. I love a Christmas story.
Well, I think it's a really nice kind of balanced episode in terms of it has some nice character development and like plenty of good visual gags, good quick one-liners, and you also grow a bit of the understanding of Leela and Fry and their relationship as well. So it's one of those kind of, I think it's the thing that Futurama does well all the way throughout its run, is that it mixes constant gags with
heart.
around the kernel of heart
yeah.
always.
This is one of the episodes that does what I've talked about as being what I think Futurama does best, is maximizing the potential that both of them have to be both funny and poignant at the same time.
Yeah.
And this is one where both of them meet each other to make a quintessential Futurama episode.
Yeah.
That's my coined phrase, quintessential Futurama episode.
Oh my God.
And builds on the mythology of Futurama. I love, because we keep finding out what's extinct, what is around now.
Nuclear winter. Global warming happened, but also nuclear war.
The War of 2012.
Which
Conan was a part of.
He
lost his legs.
He lost his freakishly long legs.
In the War of 2012, Mayan
and
calendar.
like 200 years ago, Mama's factory built a robot, basically.
800 years ago, pine trees were extinct.
Yes.
As
Very
well as
strange.
poodles.
That's very poodles.
Sorry, and your outdated
Sense of
modesty,
Yes.
modesty.
which is one of my
Yeah.
favourite gags. Goes all the way through the episode.
It died off a long time ago. They really run that through, even when they're playing chess, and then later on when he just like end the episode, so just being naked.
I like the little touch that Farnsworth has, like everything below the neck is really extra pasty and white.
But he's already
Yeah.
so pasty as it is. Also, that they've just gone so far with Zoidberg being such an outcast now that he's over the other side and he's the only person that the robot Santa believes is good.
yeah, you've all been very naughty
Yeah.
except for you.
Except for
Zoidberg.
Zoidberg. He gives him a pogo stick.
Yeah.
Let's just go into it. Favorite moments.
I'm again the clock gag.
Yeah,
With
the clock gag
digital
is-
clock. It's Tinny Tim. When they rob the old people. When it's like, what's the line when he says he talks to the bird and it's like, what's it? You talk a lot, and he's like, shut the hell up.
Yeah.
Anything with Robot Santa, I just love the idea, and like we get to see him later in a great other episode.
Yes.
Yes.
Where they go to Neptune.
To his factory, and they
Yeah.
freeze him, and they try and take over his business, basically.
Yeah. Because he has Neptunians.
Yes,
Which is the same species that Elzar is. Just little Elzars, basically. Are
Are
his,
they really? Are they the same species?
Yeah, they're Neptunians. The
Really?
purple guys with 4 arms.
I didn't know that. I just assumed they was just similar.
They're both from Neptune.
The more you know.
I think for me the favourite moment is the Zoidberg moment where Santa invades Planet Express.
Yeah.
And then you think he's going to kill them all, but actually Zoidberg gets a gift.
Yeah.
And
Instead
also-
of death.
It also has it was just a weird gag. I enjoyed it, but the whole exchanging combs for their hair by shaving their head. So what is it? Hermes shaves his hair so he can buy, Amy shaves her hair so she could buy, I'll get this right. Hermes shaves her hair, his hair, so he can buy combs for Amy, who also shaved her hair
To buy combs for Hermes.
No, so it's Amy buys shaves her hair, gives a comb to Hermes.
Yeah.
Hermes then has 2 combs because he's shaved
right.
his head to buy a comb for Zoidberg,
Zoidberg,
who
has
wearing
both their hair.
who's wearing both their hair.
It's so beautifully
It's really
random.
surreal, isn't it?
Like, does not fit with the episode anywhere, but I love it.
He wanted hair, okay? He's
He
gonna
wanted
fit in.
hair.
Other joke, I want to say, what's the bit where Conan O'Brien comedy bit where it's like, I've got something you don't, a soul, and Ben is like, and it's like, and freckles.
And he cries, yeah.
Starts crying.
I like that whole sequence with the skiing holiday. There's lots of like little touches and visual gags in that. So you might have noticed like Farnsworth has like his normal like inch thick glasses are purple because
Yeah,
they're
it's
like
got
the ski
the
goggles,
the
and the
glaze.
same thing with
Bender.
Bender, just like,
he's got
the
orange
yeah.
ones. Cool Runnings reference in there. There's a
Peanuts
reference in there where all the kids
Go
go
into the
drown, almost drown in a frozen pool. You know, there's nothing different about Christmas. You know, when she gets the axe to
got a
swing back and
laser.
it's got a laser in it instead. It's just
Like, what's the point of the blade? But I love it.
This is an episode that was one of their first story ideas to happen after the pilot. So they developed the pilot first, and Groening and Cohen, this is one of their first concepts for what would be an episode. It just took them a season to get this.
to get to Christmas.
Yeah. It was quite controversial when it aired.
Really?
Well,
Just for Santa killing people?
Yeah, Santa, and just the idea of Christmas and the way they're depicting it. So it took them another Xmas, sorry.
Yeah.
Like Askmas.
Axe instead of us. Which
I gotta ask you.
To my memory, they do keep that consistently as the season goes. Like, just in episodes, you hear them say axe. I enjoy that.
It's a fun like linguistic joke. It's almost it's quite highbrow, really.
I would just love someone to come in a later episode, just hear them, but they haven't seen the first
they
episode.
haven't seen
What?
Why do they keep saying axe?
Axe. Have I been saying it wrong this whole time? My favorite moments I've got. Did you ever stop to think about Zoidberg's feelings? No, I swear.
There's the whole bit there, and he's like, "That's very naughty. I'm gonna have to write this down right now." And it's like, oh, what's
It takes about 10 minutes to write.
I love some of the editing in there. Is that you've got the common gag of whenever you've got Linda and Morbo, the news team, the anchors, and Morbo will say something bloodthirsty or whatever. Linda laughs it off, and then there's just like a second or so of silence before she goes on. And anyway. Or that's the other one, which is there anything sadder? Drowning puppies. And there'd have to be a lot of them.
I like, hey, look, we're under the mistletoe. It's no match for my toe missile.
What do we
bird, lizard.
What do we think doesn't work?
I think it'll take a bit long to introduce Santa at all.
He does come quite late, doesn't he?
It has, yeah, they have that whole skiing trip setup, which introduces Christmas, and you sort of has that thing of like, when is the plot of this episode actually going to begin? Because I think they get a little bit lost in like, let's make as many Xmas jokes as we can.
Yeah.
So yeah, it takes. You're like, oh right, and then they're like, oh, you can't go out after dark. There's Santa. You're like, oh okay.
Yeah.
We're like 15 minutes into the episode now, and suddenly the actual problem is introduced.
Yeah, but that's like a problem they have a lot with some of these episodes where they spend so much in the setup. They might spend
Simpsons does the same thing.
Yeah, they might
a lot.
spend like 5 to 10 minutes, and really it should be around 5.
On what could be a whole separate set piece, could be the focus of a whole episode.
Yeah.
This doesn't have so much that, but you're right, is that they spend so much time on an initial location and scene that won't end up being a focal point of the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
So you can shorten that down and condense it. We'll follow along if you introduce Xmas straight away.
Like, it was very risky. It's kind of like they were skiing, but why are they skiing on Christmas Eve when they know they have to be back home later?
Well,
It's
they have a
even the same
spaceship,
day.
right?
It's still risky. Like, Santa can kill you anywhere.
Whether you take out the... I know I like the Conan gag, but I know that you could take out that...
It does kind of date, like, even now Conan's like, he's still on TV, right?
He's still on
Yeah,
TV.
he's still got his own talk show.
He's not
so
as
it's
popular as he once
No.
was.
I mean, it's not as dated as the Dick Clark reference from the pilot.
That is true.
And whoever that model was, I can't remember her name now.
Yes. The model that was in... she was the head, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And we didn't know who she was.
But so far, our cameos have been people like Conan O'Brien, Pamela Anderson, Dick
Yes.
Clark, Titanic.
They're quite good with their cameos.
Yeah.
They know who's famous, and most of them have long-lasting power.
Yeah, there's not too many cameos in this. It's just the one head and John Goodman, who's not himself. I'm not sure about the whole present buying and the pets. I think that falls a little flat to me. Electric snail and stink lizards. I kind of wanted to see maybe a bit more kind of variety in what Fry thinks is a good
What
gift.
present can he get for her?
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of just going straight to the store. And
Maybe just spend more time with Fry. I mean, like, as much as like, oh, it's cool to have Bender there, we don't really need to follow Bender and robbing random
I was going to
people.
say,
Like,
I don't...
him going to get free booze.
That little
and
side
The
plot.
soup kitchen,
I mean,
yeah.
Tinny Tim does come back later, but you can easily introduce the robots later.
Yeah, easy.
It's kind of a side plot that's doesn't need to be there.
It doesn't go anywhere. No one really learns anything apart from Tinny Tim goes hungry.
And this episode, the episode lends itself to a really strong mining of a relationship between Fry and Leela. So lean on that, like double down on that further.
Well, that's what they do really great sometimes. They focus on 2 of them and they work a story really well. But sometimes they just kind of go off track being like, we need a side story when you really don't.
I think they've got the thing. I think by this point they've realised how popular Bender is.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah.
They have to like have a plot line for Bender, and all it tells us about him is that he is not very generous and take, and that's, we know that about Bender already. It's so much of a development, and that he will rob people.
Yeah, basically.
We get a nice little take on his catchphrase as well.
Oh, lick my frozen metal ass.
Something else. Ass.
I think it's lick my frozen metal ass. Yeah.
Was it metal ass? I mean, I know he has a metal ass.
Well, usually it's kiss my shiny metal ass.
I didn't write it down. That's a shame.
Yeah, on that development, I think that's a really strong point in the episode, is when you look at Leela goes to her locker and she looks at her old photo album and
She sees the prom photo where she's holding no
one.
she's on an abandoned property desk as well.
They're so brutal to Leela. It's,
And she's got braces as well. Like, you see, in a teenage year, she had braces. Like, it really...
How can we, like, stick it to Kid Leela even more?
Yeah, because she's such a like a heroine archetype now. Cool boots and her ass kicking and all this stuff. And then, like, you realize she's a real goober when she's younger. It's a nice kind of extra layer to her character.
She had to be tough because she didn't have anyone else but herself.
Yeah. That really works, that stuff.
Let's just do it. Do you remember the episode previous to this, which is Ahead in the Polls, which is where Nixon gets introduced and becomes president?
Oh, when nobody can run for president twice,
Yes.
but I've got a shiny new robot
Yes.
body. Yeah. It's
All
one of my
right,
favourite lines in all of Futurama.
So Phil can weigh in on this.
Robot body. Can we all do a next?
Phil can weigh in on this then.
Okay, good.
So
Yeah, we
at the
worry about
moment, as we go through, we introduce the episode and match it up against the next episode. So let's say the second episode wins out. Then when we do episode 3, we pit those episodes together.
Okay.
So by the
It's
end
like
of
a
the run,
gauntlet.
we'll get our idea of what our favorite episode is.
Okay.
So at the moment, we're on Head in the Polls.
Yeah, and it's winning, so...
It's winning.
And now it's up against
now we're
this.
putting
Well,
up
like I
against
said, it
Xmas
does.
Story.
Like I haven't watched it recently, but I do freaking love that episode.
Yeah,
if
that's why it's winning.
if only for that line is so good.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of comedy potential in Nixon. I don't know why. He's just such an awful figure from history, I guess, without being so awful that you really shouldn't make jokes about him. I don't think it's really fair for me to express an opinion that will sway the decision, having not watched it recently.
Okay.
But
I don't think this is my favorite episode of
this one now.
Yeah, it's good, but it's not. So I think if you guys want a Head in the Polls to win, if that's the way you're leaning, I think I can get behind that.
Yeah, well,
Well,
I was going to vote for that,
Okay.
not this episode.
I was going to vote for this episode.
Really?
Yeah, I enjoyed this episode more. Mainly because of the mythology that we start introducing, the cameo that we get in Robot Santa, and I'm just impartial to John Goodman as a voice actor. I absolutely love his voice. I love... Basically, for me, is even though Head in the Polls is more politically charged, I'm more impartial to Fry and Leela stories.
Yeah.
I love it when we get to progress that relationship, and Farnsworth jokes for me were on point today. Naked Farnsworth
Is
that is
excellent.
good.
Naked Farnsworth. I was laughing more in this episode, I found.
that
and
is
this one
true,
has more of the heart that, as I've talked about in the past, is that if you don't have as many laughs, you prop it up with a good story, which Head in the Polls does. But I feel this
still
episode
a comedy
balances
show.
out those two sides more. So that's why I'm going for Xmas Story.
It's a tough call.
That kind of leaves me as the uninformed arbiter, which I don't think is right.
So, Phil, you are going to decide.
I'm going to decide.
Go with the heart, man.
Let's make it the
Look,
Christmas.
let me ask you this.
He was just about to agree with you and you cut him off.
Yeah, I know. I was just about to say Xmas episode.
Yeah, look,
Xmas!
Yeah, okay, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with that.
It's funny. It's got
look.
lots of good gags.
Yeah.
It did have me laughing.
Yeah, I was laughing a lot.
Man, we had like a closing statement thing going on there.
Yeah.
It's like Judge Phil.
My ruling is Xmas Story.
That'd be so much more dramatic if you hadn't have said Xmas Story before that.
Yeah, well,
We'll
can
edit it.
that.
We'll edit that in.
We'll
It'll
finish-
be great.
We'll put it in post.
Yeah.
Now the other part we get to blindside Phil with. At the end of every episode, we have to try and do one of the voices.
Oh, I do.
There
remember
we
this.
go.
I do remember this.
Yeah.
It kind of ends up being like a Stockholm Syndrome type thing. You hate it at first, but you grow to love it.
Then you have to.
You can't
do
go
it,
without it.
Are we doing Robot Santa?
We are doing Robot Santa.
Okay, that's going to be hard. I feel like I'll end up doing Nixon. Don't know why.
You still want Head in the Polls.
Yeah, let's do it. No, to be fair, like they're very close for me. It was very hard to pick. Who wants to go first? Because I don't.
Does Phil want to go first?
Yeah, he does. He does.
I make almost 50 million mega checks a second.
Damn it.
That's
Damn it, that's good.
Damn, that's good.
The whole gag is that they're bad.
We're gonna have to really up our game if he's gonna keep doing good ones.
Ho, ho, ho. It's time to get jolly on your naughty asses.
See, it's,
That was
He's a
Nixon.
yeah. There's the inkling.
I thought it was a pirate.
Yeah.
Actually.
That's what I was going for.
Yeah.
All right.
Pirate Nixon.
Pirate Nixon playing Santa Claus.
John Goodman, you've all been very naughty. That's fucking Nixon. Shit.
Were you like channeling just John Goodman there?
Yeah,
Like,
I'm
if
trying to
my
think.
in is
I'm,
Goodman.
I'm trying to think.
Yeah.
Goodman.
Just think of Big
All been
Lebowski.
very
or something.
naughty, except you, Zoidberg. It's I can't do it.
Yeah.
Phil wins.
I mean, that's just like your opinion.
yeah. We haven't been voting on who wins best.
Oh, really?
Best.
No one wins.
No one wins.
I think I
yeah.
won that one, to be fair.
Yeah.
You,
The audience,
won. Sometimes
the audience doesn't win.
The audience says I win.
Sometimes
That's the most
we don't even
important.
get close to an impression.
I mean, unless there's anything else we want to talk about, I guess the other thing is...
I'll just quickly
Let
add,
me-
I do love Amy, and like she's like kind of like rubbing up to that guy who broke his leg, and it's kind of like, oh, like you're kind of dangerous, you're a bad boy. And then it's like she sees the dude in a full body cast, and she's like, oh.
And also,
You're more
That
dangerous.
actually really sets up her character as like she really likes kind of wounded
Yeah,
men,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
the whole thing with Kif that develops is like
Yeah.
he's this like very weak, needy guy, and she
Yeah.
really goes for that. So it's something that's carried on throughout
it's
her
right,
character.
yeah.
And they keep her falling down gag. They just subvert it a bit. Instead of her falling to the ground, she hits the top of the roof.
Yeah.
In a
And she's
jetpack.
always falling down.
Yeah. So I like that they kept that.
She's gonna hit something up or down.
I'm just gonna say, like, if you want to email us, we have an
yes.
email. Let's just plug all the things. babybeardmedia@gmail.com. You can find us on iTunes and SoundCloud. You can find our Facebook page, Baby Beard Media, and no Instagram.
We need to set that up. No, we should. By the time this is out, we should have that.
This is a radio show. We're going to put it on Instagram.
No, we edit these
Behind the scenes.
We record and edit these as when we put them out.
yes.
This is live.
You're listening to this live
Better
right
not be
now.
live. If we were doing live, we'd be in trouble.
It's live on SoundCloud.
Unscripted live.
But otherwise, we'll be back next week with Why Must I Be a Crustacean in Love?
That's a great one.
Yeah, I
The
think I
Zoidberg
remember
planet.
that.
Yeah.
Where he goes.
I love that
It's
one.
mating season.
Which is where I thought the apology dance quote came from. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was in this episode.
Yeah.
There is some dancing in that, and there's a really good. Obviously, we'll get to it next week, but yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of. Yeah, the Star Trek.
Star Trek
reference.
reference.
Yeah.
Because we don't have
That
enough Star
scene
Trek
is-
references.
The scene
in
is
this.
really good, where he's got a nutcracker to fight Zoidberg
Are you
to
a
crack
Star-
his shell.
Yeah.
Are you a Star Trek fan?
Oh yeah.
You're in good company.
I
Chris,
love-
Chris
I love
wasn't.
some Star Trek. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
why we cut him.
I'm a
Yeah.
TNG kind of
The next gen is
Voyager
the,
Next-
kind of
the
guy.
next gen
Yeah.
is the best.
Now,
So good.
Enterprise.
You've all been very naughty, Sean.
Oh, I just had like a spasm in my back. That's why I kicked your chair. That was really worrisome.
It was Chris. He
So
heard
we'll
you
be back
laughing.
next week when we've replaced Sean.
Whole new cast, whole new show. Yeah,
So is it the same podcast if we replace all of the members of the podcast?
That's the
one by
eternal
one?
question. All right, guys. See ya.
See,
Bye.
I've been James, by the way.
Oh, god damn it. One
We
day
miss
I'll get
this
the
every
formula
single
from
time.
start to end. We'll have it down pat. I
I
have
don't
been
believe
Sean.
that. I don't believe that. I'm sorry. I talked over you.
This has
Did.
been
I
Phil.
have been Sean.
I've been Phil.
And I've been James.
Love J Fry. Bye.
Bye.
Blame Phil.
Blame me.
Blame
Yeah.
Phil.
Well, we've got to get to know Phil. The listeners got to get to
Yeah,
know
you
Phil.
That's what I'm
No,
doing.
no,
That's what I'm
yeah,
doing.
yeah.
I'm easing them into the
Yeah,
Phil.
so I'm sort of easing into a new
We're
family.
filling in the blanks.
A new family
That's
life.
the segment.
filling in the blanks.
It's all about Phil, though. How
Filling
you
the-
how you feeling?
How you feeling?
How you feeling?
Fill it up.
Yeah.
Fill it up.
I can feel it in the air tonight.
Yeah, fill my cup.
Filled of dreams.
Yes, we're gonna exhaust all of them.
build it, they will come.
Shut up and take one's podcast.
One's podcast. Oh, so you're aware of the voices thing.
What's the voices thing?
Oh, no, cool, awesome.
Okay,
Yep, awesome.
You said you're gonna blindside
Look,
with me, so I know that
it's
something
just-
happens
Yeah.
if I do a voice.
You said you've listened to
I
our
haven't listened to
podcast.
like 2 episodes. I'm very busy.
Oh, I didn't press record. Shit.
What are we sitting on?
Cheers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Oh.
Is that a thing?
I said, what are we sitting on?
Time
Time-wise.
wise.
Yeah.
And he said chairs.
Yeah, no, I got that part, but everyone did. Oh, on the 11 minutes, like it was significant.
Oh, no, I went, because he made a pun.
Right,
Not
no,
a pun.
yeah,
That's
it
not
was
a pun.
quite delayed. It was thought 11 minutes. It was like, oh, we're always at 11 minutes when we get started. Whoa.
We're very wacky that way.
Oh, you said the secret word!
Wah.
Tom's like, thank God I can turn this off.
Stop. You may press stop. Stop it. Shut it down.
Stop.